Well, good day. Welcome to the Chesapeake Foodshed Network's Coffee Talk series, Learning and Connecting for Action. My name is Christy Gabbard, and I'm joining you today from Southwest Virginia, where it's a pretty sunny day. It's kind of breezy and cool. Um, I am the coordinator for the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. My company, Local Concepts, is a consulting firm which is providing the development and backbone support for the Chesapeake Foodshed Network, which is bringing to you this webinar. Before jumping into the coffee talk, I did want to just kind of give you a really brief overview of the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. The Chesapeake Foodshed Network is a group of organizations, businesses, funders, agencies, and other change agents working across the Chesapeake watershed to build a stronger and more resilient food system. We're a relatively new initiative, about 2 years in the making. And the leadership group that spurred the development of the network did so because they recognized that a great deal of extraordinary work was being done to advance our regional food system, but there really wasn't an entity out there that was intentionally trying to build connections, to build trust and relationships among all of those out there doing this great work. So the mission of the Chesapeake Foodshed Network is to catalyze connections and collaborations that help build a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We believe that by catalyzing connections and collaborations, we are stronger together, and so that we can then help to accelerate the change in our food system. We encourage conversation and connection in a variety of ways, including via social media. So please note the usernames and hashtags on the slide footer. We'd love to see your tweets, and we'd love to interact with you over social media. This is just a slide to illustrate our network building blocks. The foundation of our network is all about building connections, getting to know one another, sharing information and knowledge, building relationships and trust. The idea is that as we build those connections, that we know one another, and then we can build the trust that's needed to, over time, see opportunities for alignment and to work collectively towards action. We invite anyone that supports our vision of a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system to participate in the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. And you can find out more about our network by visiting our website at chesapeakefoodshed.net. And we welcome your emails, as well as phone calls are always great. And anyway, we'd love to hear from you. This is the Coffee Talk series. The reason why we do these webinars are to help to provide a platform where we can catalyze connections around specific food system topics. The Town Creek Foundation provides the funding for our webinar series. And during these webinars, we partner with a resource expert. Today, we're partnering with Holly Rippon-Butler. We're very excited to have her today to learn more about land access and ways to facilitate land access. But basically, we use these webinar platforms as a way to provide a quick learning around a specific food system topic. And then during the webinar, we provide ways for people to continue to engage and dig in deeper around that particular topic. So you will notice throughout the webinar that we will provide you with additional resources and meetings and ways for you to continue to engage around and learn more about land access. So again, as you know, today's webinar is about the challenges and opportunities facing new farmers and seeking access to land. And we are really delighted that we had 100 people, exactly 100 people register for the webinar from across the United States. So before I get into and introduce you to Holly, I did want to just go over a few very quick housekeeping items. On your GoToWebinar control panel, all of the attendees are muted. But we do really want to hear from you. So if you have questions, there is a question feature in the GoToWebinar control panel that you can use to post any questions. And I'll be moderating those. My name actually on the attendee list is coming up as Yona Sipo. So I am filling in she's our program director, and I'm filling in for her today. But I will be moderating those questions, and we'll be sharing those with Holly after her presentation. So again, there's a question feature in the GoToWebinar control panel that we invite you to use. There are three handouts that have been posted or uploaded in the handout feature in the GoToWebinar control panel. So you can grab those. They're on their land access resource links, as well as additional resources on leasing and other land access resources. We will be following up after the webinar with the slide deck with any questions we aren't able to get to, as well as a link to the recording of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Holly and share with you a little bit of background on Holly. She is joining us from New York, the Hudson Valley, and she is the Land Access Program Director with the National Young Farmers Coalition, where she works with policymakers and land trusts to increase land access opportunities for the next generation of farmers. Holly's co-authored a guidebook for farmers on the process of partnering with a land trust to access land, and that's titled Finding Farmland, A Farmer's Guide to Working with Land Trusts. And she's organized trainings for land trusts on innovative conservation tools that help protect farmland affordability for farmers. And in addition to that, to her work with the National Young Farmers Coalition, she also farms with her parents on their third generation dairy and beef farm in upstate New York. And prior to her work with the coalition, Holly worked with the American Farmland Trust and the Agricultural Stewardship Association in New York. So with that, I want to just extend a very warm welcome to Holly Rippon-Butler. And thank you so much for being here today, Holly, to share your expertise with us.
Thank you, Christy. Really glad to be here. And I will let everyone know this is my first webinar. So I am going to get started and walk through the slides, and we'll look forward to all the question section, because normally I am really happy to take questions as I'm going. So Christy's going to help make sure that we get your questions answered as we go. So I think Christy did a great job introducing me. That's pretty much who I am. I work on land access with the National Young Farmers Coalition. I'm based in upstate New York, but I do a lot of traveling all over the country. So today we're going to talk about land access. I'm going to share with you some of the context and background of what is going on with land access for farmers across the country right now, and also talk a little bit about what all different stakeholders can do to help facilitate land access for farmers into the future. So here's a little overview. We're going to go through the context and challenges, talk about why we should care, and go through some tools and strategies, partnerships, and throughout I'll talk about case studies and share some examples from around the country. You might find yourself, you might find me talking about you if you're listening and we've met before, and if I am getting anything wrong, please feel free to correct me, because I am just trying to share what I know here, but I can always learn more. So first I will talk a little bit about what the Young Farmers Coalition is. So NYFC was founded in 2010 by 3 farmers in the Hudson Valley of New York, and the coalition was founded because these farmers were struggling to access land. They were finding that land was unaffordable, and they were being outcompeted by developers and second homeowners. They began hearing from other young farmers all over the country who were starting to get organized and were facing the same challenges, and they realized that this next generation of farmers across the country needed a voice, needed representation in Congress in DC, in the Farm Bill. And so the farmers came together, started the National Young Farmers Coalition, and since then we've grown to be a network of farmer-led chapters all across the country. We have 30 local chapters now in 26 states, and we work in three main areas. One of the main things we do is policy advocacy. We provide representation for young farmers in DC, in the Farm Bill. We're involved in appropriations each year, advocating for funding to go to programs that are appropriate for farmers and addressing farmers' needs. And we work really closely with USDA agencies such as the Farm Service Agency and the NRCS, and try to help ensure that their programs are being developed and deployed in a way that works for young farmers. So, and I already mentioned our chapters. The second thing that we do is network building, and we focus on helping young farmers get organized in their communities and on encouraging farmer leadership development. We just a couple weeks ago had our second annual chapter leader convergence out in San Diego. So become a chapter leader. You might get to go hang out in San Diego in the fall, which is a real benefit. The third thing that we do is business services. So we are a membership-based organization. Anyone can become a member, farmers, consumers. We have a number of membership benefits that are definitely worth checking out on our website with all different corporate partners and farm supply companies. We publish reports and guidebooks. Christy mentioned the guidebook that we wrote a couple of years ago on working with land trusts. We also have a guidebook on organic transition. We have some reports on land conservation, and we have reports on water in the West that recently came out. We also do some case studies and have a handbook on organizing. And we're working right now on a guide to FSA programs, so stay tuned. The other thing that we provide to our members is a voice in DC. So we have some polls. I've talked to you a little bit about me and NYFC. I want to get a sense of who's on the line. And Christy is going to help me with this. So the choices are somewhat limited. We recognize there's a lot more diversity in what people are doing in the food system, but GoToWebinar only let us have 5 options. So try to place yourself within one of these 5, and we'll get a sense of who is joining us.
Great, thanks. I'm just gonna give a couple more minutes, and then we'll close this poll, and I'll share the results.
Okay. Should I?
Here we go.
Move on.
So there's
great.
A lot of diversity. A lot of folks from the nonprofit sector, land trust, service providers, and farmers. Great to have the farmers here, as well as other business owners. So 16% of you are farmers, 13% from the for-profit world. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Christy. So, okay. Quickly, I'm just going to go through, provide a little bit of context for you about, what's going on in the status of farmland transfer and access across the country. For farmers, this might not feel really relevant. Maybe doesn't matter so much to you what's happening nationally as much as what's happening where you are trying to access land. But I think that there's a point to be made that these larger trends really trickle down and have an effect on the local level. And also, I think sometimes talking about these statistics is important because it gives us all the words and the statistics to talk to people, to raise awareness of what's going on in agriculture right now. So I'm just going to throw some at you really quickly, and I think if you want to see any of these or see where I got them from, we're happy to share that information. But basically, according to the latest census, we've got 914 million acres of ag land in production in the United States. 23 million acres of farmland have been lost to development over the last 25 years, though. And 63% of all farmland is currently farmed by an individual who is 55 or older, which, if you consult actuarial tables, leads you to conclude that we've got 573 million acres of land that are going to be needing a new farmer. They're going to be needing a new manager in the next 25 years. So we've got a big amount of farmland transition coming, happening, and here's a little bit of information about what is going on right now with our farmland ownership and values. So over a third of land in the U.S. right now is rented, mostly for use as cropland, and nearly half of the owners, about 45% of the owners of this rented land, have never farmed. Now, it makes sense that owners of farmland that's being rented are not current farmers, which is also a pretty high statistic, but I think it's in some ways concerning and something that we need to be paying attention to, that nearly half have never farmed. These are non-farming landowners. And that's in some ways a good thing, and I'll highlight later why non-farming landowners should be leasing their land to farmers and how that's an important partnership. But it also is just something to watch for, because in many ways sometimes these landowners don't understand the needs of farmers and can complicate the ability of farmers to gain secure access. So another point that I thought was really interesting is that agricultural land is no longer valued for agricultural use in the way that it used to be. The USDA has a statistic in one of their reports where they talk about the people in the 1950s used to be able to buy a farm and pay off your mortgage with the money you could make from renting that land out for agriculture. So demonstrating that there was demand for ag land from farmers, and you could pay it off in a relatively short amount of time. It now takes twice as long. So the conclusion in the report is that this is demonstrating the trend that farmland for ag use is, we're seeing a decrease in the value of ag land for its agricultural use. More value is coming from second home ownership or other uses. So just one more statistic from the recent USDA total survey: 100 million acres of U.S. land will change hands in the next 5 years. And I think one of the details of that survey that I found really interesting is that only 21 million acres are expected to be sold to non-relatives. So for farmers who are not coming from a farming background, there is going to be additional challenge in gaining access to land. So this is just a graph to show you kind of where land is being rented. In the red areas, there's higher percentage of leased land. So a little more context just to show you that this is a graph showing farm real estate values, that's land and infrastructure, since the 1850s. And you can see that real estate values have doubled in the last decade. There's significant increase. We're in kind of a period of farm real estate valuation that's different than at many points in our recent history. So to help put you in the mindset of a farmer, for those on the call or on the webinar who are not farmers themselves, and you may all already know this, but we'll just kind of go through these challenges real quickly. NYFC did a survey in 2011, found that about 68% of respondents cited land access as a primary challenge. Similarly, about 78% of respondents said they did not come from a farming background, so that kind of leads back into the challenge I was talking about before of how they're going to need help. They're not having families who are necessarily passing on land to them and are going to need the partners to get involved. And then, for fractionated land ownership, land loss, and discrimination against access and barriers to financing are disproportionately affecting farmers of color, migrant workers, and immigrant farmers. So just, when we think about the context of land access, it looks different for different young farmers. Land near markets is really expensive, so farmers want to be near markets because that's where often, especially if they're direct marketing, it's the most efficient place for them to be, but land there can be twice as expensive. Pre-existing debt, such as student loans, is preventing farmers from accessing capital to access land, and I could talk more about what NYFC is doing to address this, but you can spend some time on our website, look up our Farming as Public Service campaign if you're interested. Other things similar to market access, water rights, other land infrastructure features can more than double the cost of land. So on the other slide we saw, the average cost of farm real estate now is around $3,000 an acre. That is a real average figure for the country. I mean, some places are seeing more like 10,000 an acre. Some places like on Long Island, it can be up to $100,000 an acre. So there's a real vast difference, and I just wanted to get at some of the granularity of that and what could be causing that. And then, of course, the challenge of retiring farmers needing to recoup their equity from their business and their land. So, the price of farmland is what it is because there are a lot of legitimate needs of existing owners to get value out of that land. So, real quickly, again, why do we need more farmers? You all likely understand all of these things, but these are just my sort of 5 points of when I talk about this, how I think about the issue. It's part of our Foodshed and national security, meeting our needs in those areas. 80% of people live in urban areas. We need to be providing them with food. Concentration of our food supply is vulnerability, and then economic. Farmers use less in community services than they pay in taxes. There's a figure that's about 35 cents on the dollar. So these are real benefits to local economies. And farmers make long-term investments. They're taking out financing and building infrastructure often that are meant to generate return over a long time. So they're stable businesses in communities. Socially, farmers are revitalizing our rural communities, learning skills and carrying them on from previous generations, and numerous other benefits that if any of you live in a farm community, you've probably experienced. Farmers have, they're stewards of our environment, our soil quality, and as we've demonstrated in some of our work in the western United States, they have a lot of ability to help mitigate climate change and keep carbon in the ground and really use water-saving practices. So I think farmers have a really important role to play in stewarding our environment. This is just a quick point that I want to make that, with more farmers is less consolidation. More farmers means we have more people representing our food supply. When it comes to policies in DC, when some legislation comes up that affects our food supply, the more voices we have who are involved in that work day to day and who are engaged in providing a voice and speaking up at that moment of change, I think is a real value. So again, just a little bit more on the context here. This is the path to land access, and this is a very simplified version. So desire to farm, gain farm experience, plan for your farm, search for your land, secure farm tenure, and success. And I think we all know that this particular area is a little bit more complicated. So to help you get in the mindset of a farmer who's looking for land, here's my version of a slightly more nuanced version of what this looks like. So first, in your farm search, you're locating land. Is there land that's coming on the market? Often land in rural areas transfers without even coming on a formal real estate market. Is it where you want to live? Are there good school districts? Is it close to markets? And all of this is related to whether or not it's affordable. Okay, so maybe you found land where you want to be, near a market you want to be. Is it the right size? Is there room for expansion? You might find, a 300-acre former dairy farm, plenty of room for expansion, but not really appropriate for your plan for a 10-acre vegetable farm, and similarly, not necessarily affordable. Uh, Furthermore, does that land have the right resources? Especially out west, people are really concerned with water rights, but we have a lot of concern over water quality as all over the country. Does it have the right soils? If you want to grow vegetables, are there good quality soils that are going to allow you to get started right away, or are you going to have to put in a lot of soil amendments and infrastructure on the property, which of course relates to whether or not it's affordable. And then, okay, maybe we've figured out all those things and you secure farm tenure. For how long, though? Is there ability to build equity in the lease or through ownership? And is it an equitable arrangement? Are rights and responsibilities shared between leasee and landholders? And okay, now you have to access capital. So what are the terms? Are you going to have to combine multiple sources of financing? Do you have pre-existing debt that makes this challenging? Um, and then maybe you're going to have to navigate farm transition, which, as you know, might involve a lot of personalities and just complicated needs on all sides. But then, hopefully, you've found success. So that is my more nuanced version of the path to land access to help you get in the mindset of a farmer looking for land and start to think about where do you and the services that you provide come into this equation and what can you help with. So farmers need land that's available, accessible, appropriate, and affordable. We have another poll. I'm curious to hear from you. What are the biggest obstacles to accessing land for farmers in your region? And again, we were limited to 5 choices, so we understand that this is likely much more nuanced and perhaps a combination of all of these things. And feel free to comment in the chat section, and we'll definitely be interested in hearing from you at the end about these particular challenges and what people are doing to help.
Okay, we're still getting a couple more answers, and I'll go ahead and close out the poll in about 5 seconds here. Okay, and here are the results. So the biggest obstacle is competition from developers and second homeowners, followed very closely by accessing capital to buy land. It seems as though farm transition isn't as big as a problem, or competition from consolidation with the attendees today. And so I'll turn it back over to you then, Holly. Thank you all.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's really interesting to sort of see and be interested as we get into the discussion session to hear kind of where people are coming from in the country and how those challenges are sort of playing out regionally. So, okay, moving on to the second part of the presentation today. We've heard about the challenges, and hopefully that wasn't purely review or preaching to the choir, but in any case, I think we're all hopefully more interested to talk about what can we do and what are the resources and strategies that we can employ to address this challenge. I have just made this little thought bubble chart of kind of explaining how I'm gonna think about this in the next section. We've got our challenges that we've been talking about, all the different players who might be involved in this work and in the scene, and we'll go through by player and then talk about some of the tools and strategies, and I'll give some examples. So to start, I was going to start kind of with something I consider to be the real basis of some of this work is information. Educators, researchers, these are really important in this land access challenge, addressing the land access challenge. They might not be on the front lines all the time, involved in the real estate deal, but having this information is really valuable. So I just wanted to give some ideas, share some examples of this that I've seen across the country work, and being real of value. Uh, Across the top, I have a little bar of sort of some of the goals and value that researchers and educators play, and what they can do to help address this. So one of the things I think in research is really important is just listening to stakeholders, having focus groups, conducting surveys. I have the logo of the Mesa Land Trust, which is out in Colorado. I think they did as a land trust, a really interesting project called their Fruitlands Forever initiative, where they looked at one particular valley and needed to determine how are they going to go about prioritizing land to protect. And they decided to talk to all the stakeholders. They talked to farmers, they talked to the processing companies that were packaging and distributing the fruit. There's mainly fruit orchards in that valley, and they said, okay, to the processors, how many farmers do you need in this valley to remain viable? And to the farm service providers, such as the equipment companies, and well, in this case, I guess not vets, but perhaps other supply companies that were working with the farmers, asked them, how many farmers keeps your business viable? And then for the farmers, asked how much land keeps your business viable? And then they came up with their goal of how many acres to protect. And I think it's a really neat example of starting with viability and looking at the whole scene, looking at who's involved in keeping farms viable, and then working backwards from listening to those people to figuring out how much land do we need to make that happen, what is the land base, and how can we as a land trust protect that. So I think that's a really great example of doing some research, approaching it. Research can have a big benefit for policy advocacy as well. In our work, we use reports and statistics a lot, and it takes a lot of effort to really get those to gather those facts. So I think I just threw up a few examples. The Liberty Prairie Foundation and Open Lands published a report called Breaking Ground, where they listed out a lot of really great examples and solutions and ideas, and broke down the report by audience, so for farmers and for landowners and for policy people in public policy. So, and then I just said partnering with the university can be a powerful way to get some help making sure your statistics are accurate. Education, some examples I've seen. The Columbia Land Conservancy and the Dutchess Land Conservancy in New York State have a workshop series called Down to Earth for landowners and farmers, where it's all aspects of land access. They will talk about the legal aspects. They'll talk about working with an appraiser, talk about I gave a presentation one time about farmer needs, and that was mainly geared towards landowners. But these are some ways educators can get involved, provide workshops for farmers, workshops for landowners and stakeholders. We do a series of trainings for land trusts where we bring together experts to talk to land trusts about some of the new tools they can be using to help farmers. And then there's just this whole idea of best practices and curriculum sharing. The Northeast Beginning Farmer Learning Network, which some of you or many of you may be a part of, is a great example of trying to share resources across the region. And then developing outreach materials for consumers and realtors and folks outside of just farmers. So, okay, moving on to our next sphere of influence or player in this land access world, advocates and public policy, people involved in public policy or public employees or officials have a really important role to play in raising awareness and influencing policy, giving stakeholders a voice. Things you can do: become a member of an advocacy group, write and call your legislators, hold on-farm meetings, write an op-ed. These are all things that groups like NYFC and Farmers Union and Farm Bureau can help you do. And participate in local government, join a planning or zoning board when you have the opportunity, and advocate for farmers to have representation at the local level. And communities can come together to advocate for things like community farms. I guess just making the point that this can happen at many levels, but there's a really important role to play locally. Some things that people who are in public office can do, there's, initiate a process of planning for agriculture, county plans, taking into account, doing those focus groups and gathering stakeholder feedback from the farm community. Maryland and Delaware have some really innovative conservation funding programs that help use easements to help finance land access for farmers. In New York State, the Department of Environmental Conservation is providing access to state park land on a limited basis to give some farmers access to grazing on state lands, and invite young farmers to the table, hear what they have to say. In New York State, the Commissioner of Agriculture convened a beginning farmer working group, which had some farmers and a lot of service providers, but think about how you can get the voice of the people affected by your policies at the table, is the point that I wanted to make there. Okay, farm service providers. Well, many of you, I don't need to tell you how to help young farmers access land. You think about this every day, but just some broad categories, things I've seen, land linking, helping with land evaluation, helping with business planning, transition planning, and providing legal assistance are all areas where farmers need help in land access. And these things can be done online or in person through long courses that go out over weeks, or one-day workshops. They can be free, or farmers can pay for them. Lots of ways and different examples to get out providing your services. And an example I really like is the Hudson Valley Farmland Finder that the American Farmland Trust developed in upstate New York. They facilitated a partnership of lots of different land trusts and service providers throughout the Hudson Valley. And AFT organizes the central website and deals with farmers and landowners who are listing their properties and helps kind of explain to them the process, and then connects them with a local organization, and is providing workshops and services along with that central land linking work, which I think is really a great example. I have a little case study just to bring it back to the real world. This is Ironwood Farm in the Hudson Valley. 3 women farming partners. They were leasing land and worked really closely with the Columbia Land Conservancy over a couple of years to find the right piece of property, and ultimately it was a success story, but just an example of, I think, patience and partnership working out. So on that topic, land trusts and realtors and landowners, people who deal in the day-to-day, who have the potential to influence the real estate transition and have an impact in that area. A lot of my work is focused on engaging the land trust community and farmers and helping them understand the potential to partner together. So I could do a whole presentation on just those few bullet points, and I'm happy to talk with anyone who wants to hear more about examples in that area. But land trusts have a lot of potential to help lower the cost of farmland through easements, and we're seeing increasing land trusts with interest in using easements that have provisions in them that increase affordability of farms for farmers. The Vermont Land Trust has been using the option to purchase at agricultural value for over a decade with a lot of success. And we're also seeing land trusts own land and develop incubator properties. The Southern Appalachian Highlands Conservancy in North Carolina has an incubator property. Land trusts are also using ground leases, a tool where they own the land but actually provide a long-term, such as a 99-year lease, to the farmer, and the farmer owns the infrastructure and can build equity in the buildings on the property. Land trusts are doing some lease-to-own deals, getting involved in land linking, providing integrated farmland protection programs, so thinking about farm viability, not just protection. The Mount Grace Land Conservation Trust in Massachusetts has a great example of getting involved in purchasing a building to help farmers develop a food hub in their region, because they saw that as farmers coming to them and telling them what they really needed to maintain viable and in turn keep land in production. The Columbia Land Conservancy has an outreach program to realtors, and I think just in general, there's a large role for realtors to play in working with landowners to think about how can we reach farmers first before we take this property to a developer. And for landowners, I just say, understand your resources, get to know what you have, be realistic about, do you have things on your property that farmers are looking for, and what can you offer? Think about flexible partnerships, offering farmers a lease in exchange for any tax breaks that you might get by having your land in agriculture. Being flexible with your lease payments, thinking about making lease payments due at times when farmers have greater cash flow, working with farmers to put easements on the property before they purchase, providing housing if possible, helping farmers build equity. These are all some ways that as landowners you can really keep farmers in mind and be helpful. So this is a quick example of a land trust getting involved in lease to own, and this is up in the Adirondacks of New York and the Open Space Institute. They purchased the property, so got it off the market, which was one of the big challenges, and then were able to offer a lease to own arrangement to the farmers due to as a result of some major donor who got involved, and the lease payments actually went towards the purchase price. And now in year 3, the farmer has applied for and received FSA funding to purchase the farm with an easement being placed on the farm at the time of purchase. So seeing a lot of different partners come together, but keeping the farmer's needs kind of at the heart of the transaction. So speaking of money, funders, investors, if you're on the call or the webinar, thank you for your interest. You're so important. Farmers need you. Farmers are up against, as I hope I conveyed at the beginning, some really intense market pressures and pressures out of their control that are really contributing to making farmland unaffordable on a farming income. So farmers need help in 2 areas. They need help getting land off the market quickly, competing in the real estate market, and then they need help affording it on a farm income. So be creative. Think about how you and your resources can come into play in either of those situations. And as a general rule for farmland investors, if you are putting the farmer's needs first and thinking about purchasing the land second, that is in some ways a good practice, because where farmland investment can get a little tricky for really providing benefit to farmers is when the farmland investors actually become a competitor for the farmers. So some great examples: Iroquois Valley Farms, Dirt Capital Partners are a couple. Land for Good recently did a report on farmland investors, and there's a lot more resources in there to check out. So yeah, a couple other things funders can do: convene stakeholders, fund research, fill in the gaps of public funding and cost share. So when farmers are accessing land or land trusts are trying to work with public funding, there's often a cost share component, and there are a lot of things that public funding won't cover. Land purchase is one of those that through the Conservation Easement Funding Program, the ASEP program, you can receive funding to put an easement on land as a land trust, but not to purchase that land and put a ground lease or something on that. So think about the areas where land trusts and stakeholders and farmers need your help. So this is an example. In the interest of time, I'm going to just keep going real quickly. I wanted to mention quickly, if you're a for-profit company or consumer, you have a huge role to play as well. And these are just two very quick examples. There are a lot of other companies getting interested in thinking about land as part of their supply chain, and I think there's a lot of potential there. Um, and then aligning goals, the role of partnership, sort of use this as one of my last slides. Just wanted to, say, think outside the box, think about who your partners and can be outside of the folks you typically work with. There's a great example in New Haven, Connecticut called New Haven Farms, where they have really partnered in a great way with the healthcare industry and hospitals to have doctors provide prescriptions to farmers to get out to the farm and to access food on those urban farms. Branding and working with economic development might not seem like it's so related to land access, but the more you can promote a region as a local food source, the more value you're placing on that land resource, and that all helps. Cooperative land ownership is another way of approaching partnerships. There are some great examples of consumers and farmers working together, CSA members supporting ownership. And I just have this last public and private example. Acres for America is a program I don't know much about, so perhaps shouldn't talk too much about it, but my understanding is that it's a partnership between Walmart and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and things like that I think makes, I guess we should tread carefully, but there I think is a lot of potential to think about where can financing come from to protect land. So just I have some more examples in here. I want to get to your questions though, so I'm gonna skip through. I have a ground lease example, an example of a number of different partners coming together, including a local food advocacy group. For farmers, I realize I haven't given you very much so far, and I want to say I hope, if you're wanting to get some more specific information, check out some of the resource sheets that I uploaded. Those are really more geared towards farmers, giving you some ideas of online tools, organizations, financing, paths to ownership, places to look for resources. So we'll move on to poll, and which kind of leads us into our discussion section. I'm interested to see where people are coming from, how you're thinking about engaging in land access for the next generation of farmers. And Christy's going to help me with that.
Okay. The poll should be up. Thanks, Holly. Here we go.
Yeah. And I'll just, while you're thinking about answering the poll, I'll say the next slide I have up is just about thinking about next steps. And really all I have to say there is think about your sphere of influence, your resources, and then try to think about the farmer needs and this path to land access that they're facing, and figure out where they match up, and be creative, and assign yourself a next step. Write down one thing you might do to help these farmers, and let's have some discussion.
Yeah, here's the answers to the poll results. Sounds like moving forward, a number of the attendees will provide technical service to farmers accessing land, followed by the farmer themselves accessing land. And then the other three options came in at relatively the same percentage. So you can see those up there on your screen.
Okay, thanks, Christy.
You're welcome.
So let's see. Yeah, this is where I mentioned next steps. Just get familiar with your resources, write down one next step, and here is my contact information if you want to talk more.
Great. Great. And I wonder, I do have some questions for you, Holly, and I wonder if do you want to put up that other question slide just to help seed any thoughts that people might have, the question and discussion slide. Okay, great. And I thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. We did just get a comment that there is so much rich information in your slides, Holly, and someone wanted to know if they would have access to the slide deck after the presentation, and we will be sending that out to you all. So again, Holly, thank you so much for such a dense, like as Melissa said, your slides are full of so much great information. One of the questions that we got from an attendee, Kurt Nelson, actually, thank you, Kurt, is whether or not, Holly, you have any examples of investors doing a joint venture LLC with farmer operators with stock grant and or options like in a tech company.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I will just say that there is, well, okay, so maybe not directly, but I believe that there is a group with the Pinchot Institute out in Washington State, but they're doing some work in the Northeast and out in Washington State, and it's a project called the Working Farms, wow. Anyways, I'm blanking on the name, but I can share that afterwards as well. And they are looking at innovative finance models, and I believe have looked into how can strategies like that be developed. The closest thing that's sort of coming to mind for me is this idea of a real estate investment trust, or REITs they call them, where there is, to my very limited financial understanding, some element of sharing ownership in that way. And I know the Working Farms project at the Pinchot Institute they've been thinking about how to use these models. So we could certainly get to the bottom of that and see if we could find a specific example if anyone's doing that. But yeah, hope that helps.
Kurt also asked as a follow-up, do you have any examples of outsourced management service companies providing bookkeeping, logistics, grant seeking, etc.?
Yeah, that's another thing that the Pinchot Institute project is looking at doing. So they are seeing if they can develop a model that would do that, and they're looking at both farms and family forest projects, or family forest owners. And I will again defer and say Ben Hayes at that project would be a great resource to see if he's familiar with any other groups that are doing that.
Thank you, Holly. Another person wanted to know if you could give a definition of land linking. Just provide a little more information around what that means and what that looks like.
Oh yeah, sure. And it is tricky, and I would actually encourage everyone to check out one of the reports I put up in that first slide that says farm linking in the Northeast, or it's a report about that came out a couple of years ago from a student at Penn State. And anyways, I think because it is really complicated, and there's land linking, there's just matching, and there are different degrees of service provider involvement in different iterations of what this looks like. So there's land listing, which is just creating a venue, bulletin board, a website, or whatever it is for people to say, I have land, and others to say, I want land. And then, there's land linking, which is actually providing some degree of assistance in making that match between people. But I think that there's really a lot farther that organizations can and are going with this, and the idea of matching is really really much more involved than just that simple creating the link between people, and it can involve, and that's sort of why I put the Hudson Valley Farmland Finder up there, because I think they are doing a really good job of figuring out how to create a model that does some of this listing, linking, and really puts matching in the hands of the local partners and land trusts, and takes into account, local on the ground knowledge, and the need for some personal attention to these matches to really help them work, because you're dealing with a lot of just personalities and factors. And so anyways, thanks. Yeah, is a great question, and I think there's a lot of detail to be explored there.
So I just put in the chat box to give an example, the FarmLink program in Virginia that's offered through the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, if anyone's interested in taking a look at that. I also posted in the chat box the name of that document you mentioned. And again, we'll send out the slide deck to all the registrants so that you'll have those resources readily available. Holly, before we move on to the next question, there was some clarification asked around the institute that you mentioned. If you could spell the name of the institute that you mentioned as an answer to Kurt's questions.
Yeah, the Pinchot Institute, Pinchot, their Working Lands Project.
And I've put that in the chat box as well. Wayne Parks, thanks for your question. Wayne wanted to know, Holly, if you're familiar with the Farmer Veteran Coalition, where young veterans get involved in agricultural professions.
Yes, and that's a really great point, that there are a lot of yes, that organization is a really excellent partner, doing really focused work on helping a certain sector of new farmers and people who want to get into agriculture. So we've worked with them a little bit. I think that it's a great organization and a great example of the just depth of field here in the service provider sector. I think other things that kind of similar to that I didn't mention. There are groups really focusing and addressing specific land access issues, such as air property rights. I mentioned a little bit the fractionated land ownership in the beginning, but the Center for Air Property and the Land Loss Prevention Program are two in particular, and the Farmer Veteran Coalition. And I know there are others that are addressing veteran needs, and probably numerous other organizations that are doing really great work addressing specific land access needs. So thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Well, Holly, again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your such a busy schedule. The National Young Farmers Coalition is doing such fantastic work, and we appreciate you being here today. I did want to just, I'm going to share my screen really quick so that you all can have access to Holly's contact information again. And there you go. I hope that you can see that. Thank you all for coming today and joining us this afternoon. I also wanted to just share with you some next steps. As I mentioned earlier, one of our goals is to provide ways for you to continue to engage around this and this topic. And so here are some conferences that are coming up: the Young Farmers Conference out at Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture. The Future Harvest CASA conference in Maryland, that's in January, is a really fantastic conference for farmers, and land access is a topic that is of discussion that is discussed there. Farming for the Future in State College, Pennsylvania in February, Cultivate Baltimore coming up in May, and then Changing Lands, Changing Hands in Denver in June. So those are some upcoming events that you may want to look into. And we do want to thank you so much for attending the webinar today. And again, I want to extend a big thank you to Holly for sharing your experience and your expertise. We will follow up early next week with the recording, link to the recording, as well as the slide deck. We encourage you, and a list of these resources. Want to remind you again, there are handouts in the handout feature that you can grab before you log off of the webinar. And we will also include a survey in that in the follow-up materials. We would love to hear your thoughts around how helpful this was, as well as any other topics that you would like to know more about with respect to land access or food system work in general. If you would like to serve as a resource expert for a webinar, don't hesitate. We would love to have you be a resource expert and to showcase your good work. So feel free to reach out to me, Christy Gabbard. My email address and phone number are up on the screen. And below are a list of some of the other upcoming coffee talks that we have in the beginning of 2017. So with that, again, thank you all for joining us. Feel free to visit ChesapeakeFoodshed.net for more information and to register for upcoming events. And we hope that we will see you in the near future. Thank you all very much for your time. Have a wonderful day. Holly?
Yeah, hi, Christy.
Hey. Um, actually, let me stop this recording.
Oh, yeah.